It is time now for overlooked stocks, and we have AST SpaceMobile firmly locked and loaded on our radar on this Friday. Let's welcome in George Tsilis. He is senior markets correspondent. George, it is great to have you here. So for people a bit unfamiliar with this name, it does look as if AST SpaceMobile is extending its spectrum access in North America. We teased before going to the break there that the stock hit a fresh all-time high earlier today. It really seems as if it's been knocking the cover off the ball so far year to date. Walk us through the story. What should we know, George?
Yeah, I think this is actually kind of an impressive story in an adjunct fashion compared to what's going on with Starlink and Elon Musk. ASTS SpaceMobile is essentially a competitor in the race to bring low orbit cellular networks that are space driven to customers, not necessarily just customers in areas where there's a lot of latency and not a lot of concentrated access like 5G cell towers in rural areas. I think this technology is starting to develop into something that's very useful and going to be needed, especially when it comes down to the seamless communications that are needed for things like robotics and autonomous driving. And so the coverage areas now that are traditionally handled by 5G will be supplemented with low orbit satellite communications that are driven particularly from low orbit satellites that ASTS is launching, along with competitors like SpaceX as well as Amazon. And I think this company is demonstrating some nice movements, particularly in the past couple of weeks, based on the back of what's going on with Elon Musk, and potentially now as a competitor, they may gain some favorability from a regulatory and government standpoint. And they did also receive access to a FCC bandwidth in the 40 megahertz spectrum, which is the low and medium bandwidth spectrum that they traditionally tackle and go after. And ASTS has not really been just a year-to-date or even a last year's story. I mean, the stock is higher in the last year by about 290%. But if you look at the last 3 years, it's up over 5x or almost 500%. And it really took off, particularly last May, where they actually launched their first satellite into orbit, to which they're going to have in total 168 low orbit satellites to essentially cover their low and medium grade spectrums for communications networks. But I think they're going to be in high demand going forward, particularly because all of the autonomous driving needs in the future require seamless communications uninterrupted. And whatever is interrupted from a satellite standpoint is covered by cellular, traditional cellular, and then vice versa. Any holes in the networks that are not covered by cellular will be picked up by of course, low orbit satellite communications.
George, we've seen the stock do particularly well after previous FCC approvals, and I wonder from a regulatory and government perspective for the stock, which you just mentioned there a moment ago, how crucial is that regulatory support? And from where you're situated, is this a regulatory regime, a regulatory environment with this administration, this tone and temperature in Washington, D.C. that you think could work to the benefit even further of a company like AST SpaceMobile?
Well, I think so. I think, irregardless of who's in office, I think this is a technology that is moving forward. I think ASTS as a specific company may actually benefit with some of the turmoil that's going on with the Trump administration and Elon Musk, who, of course, has SpaceX and has Starlink as a technology underneath that. So competition will certainly be fierce. There's going to be some major players. Amazon Blue Origin is one of them, Starlink, another in SpaceX, and ASTS has significant partnerships with major telecom companies and technology partners like Google, Vodafone, which is essentially the equivalent of AT&T and Verizon in Europe, but also partnerships with AT&T and Verizon. So they've already got some big deals set up with major telecom producers or providers in our country and Canada. But I think the underlying challenge with ASTS as a company is, the revenue base, just to be mindful of, in the last year is only about $4.5 million, market cap about $12 billion. They're burning about $350 million in cash, but they do have about $850 million in cash on the balance sheet to cover them. So nonetheless, anytime a stock like this makes a move to the upside, they're going to take advantage of it, probably issue some secondary offerings, as they should, to help finance their CapEx and expand their networks.
Yeah, it's certainly a competitive landscape, but to your point, though, securing and scoring a lot of those key deals with a lot of other companies, the Vodafones and Googles of the world. What is one thing here, George, that you will be closely following for this stock, let's say for the next 2 quarters, between when we're having this conversation and the end of 2025, that maybe investors or our audience might also start to pay a little bit more attention to?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think progress on their satellite launch sequence is going to be important because it's a huge catalyst. Obviously, that'll help generate revenues to offset the cost of the business because right now they're not generating very much revenue at all. And so that's important to keep in mind, irrespective of the nice move we've seen in the last year or the last 3 years and even in the last couple of weeks. It's a very volatile stock. So the sequence and progression of satellite launches is key for this business. Additional partnerships, additional spectrum, and then regulatory approvals, and of course, regulatory partnerships with government and private sector are also key.
George Tsilis, thank you for the breakdown, helping us learn a little bit more about a pretty important name there on your radar. George, thank you.